Good morning, good morning. I feel like I'm standing too far away from the audience. I wish the podium was closer, but anyway, good morning. It's my pleasure to be here. Honorable Permanent Secretary Richard Nwenchuti, representing the Minister of Trade and Industry, One UN Resident Coordinator, Mr. Ozania Ojello, executives and officials from the UN Economic Commission for Africa, who I think are also part of this discussion, leaders in government, diplomats present, development partners, representatives from the private sector, captains of industry, academia. We have a wide selection of people here, moderators and panelists, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to you all once again. It gives me great pleasure to join you today in person at this very important forum, and I would really like to extend my gratitude to the Ministry of Trade and to the UN for inviting us. Being present and listening to the discussions, I think, will add a lot of value to the work that we do, the agenda that we coordinate at the ESC Secretariat. And I also bring warm greetings from the Secretary General, who would have loved to be here, but due to other priorities, he was unable to attend, but he does send his regards. I also understand that this forum, as we heard from the UN Resident Coordinator, is part of our regular policy dialogues convened under the auspices of the UN and Rwanda cooperation that has lasted over 60 years now. That is a long time. So I really must commend you for also this innovation to get people together to discuss, to brainstorm, and to reflect. Many subjects have been discussed so far, so I'm really pleased that this time around we'll be speaking about the AfCFTA. The topical issues and a part of what we already had in the opening remarks are all very timely and a high priority for our region. Given the difficult circumstances that we are all aware of, the geopolitical situation in Europe, the tight global financial conditions, the lingering effects of COVID-19, climate-related issues, all of these are a wake-up call to our region and to Africa at large. How do we explore our potential? How do we remain resilient? I think that's very, very important. And I think COVID-19 was a strong wake-up call to us to be prepared. We don't know when the next emergency is going to arrive. So I think resilience plans was a major gap in our region, and it's an issue I hope that we will reflect on today and take away. How do we continually develop resilience plans and update them? I will give you a very quick synopsis of the ESC macroeconomic situation, and I hope this also sets the stage for the subsequent topical issue on the AfCFTA. Despite the challenges faced by the ESC economies, all the economic shocks that we just discussed, the region was still able to sustain positive economic growth, which improved to 4.8% in 2022 from 3.5% in 2021. And from the latest economic outlook of the Africa Development Bank, it is projected that the ESC growth prospects will strengthen to 5.1% in 2023 and 5.8% in 2024. Now, that's really important because it means the region is resilient. It means that to be able to achieve this growth, however, we will have to take certain steps, certain actions to be able to sustain it. It's also worth noting, however, that not all countries are growing at the same pace. Some countries are lagging behind due to various factors, such as conflict, such as pockets of violence, and other difficult issues that they are faced with in their own production structures, declines in prices and all. But it's worth commending that the ES is one of the regions or has maintained its position as the fastest growing sub-region in Africa. That's a really important issue as well. Now on inflation, the overall inflation in the region increased to 5.1% from 4.2% in the previous year. But this was below the benchmark. The region had anticipated inflation at around 8%, and while inflation increased, it was still below the benchmark. And the increase was mainly due to the international commodity prices, mainly food and energy prices, and also the global shocks that we just talked about, as well as the adverse weather conditions that affected agricultural production. It is expected that this will ease, supported by monetary policy stance already adopted in the region, improved food supply, and I think that has continued to improve lately, and moderation in commodity prices in the global markets. On the private sector, the demand for credit in the private sector continued to grow in the region, owing to recovery of economic activities. However, the availability of credit remains a huge challenge. The cost of financing remains a huge challenge in the region. And these are some of the issues I hope that we can reflect on. We talk about credit, we talk about financing as important for the private sector. And what we hear at the ESS Secretariat from the private sector is they are given lip service. The solutions that are targeted at the needs of the private sector based on the financing requirements do not meet the financing that is available. How are we going to bridge the demand with the supply? From the Secretariat, again, policy officials that are responsible for this are reflecting on these issues. The reflection processes are taking longer than they should because business is being slowed down. Business is being slowed down. And I hope through conversations such as these, we will hear some proposals of how we can address these challenges. As a regional economic bloc, what can we do to be able to support the availability of such resources? Most partner states are yet to meet the target on fiscal deficits, reflecting government interventions to cushion economies from the adverse effects of COVID-19 and continued investment in infrastructure. I also wish to remind you of the regional integration process as it's moving forward, and the fact that the Monetary Union Protocol implementation should start by 2031. However, the fiscal convergence criteria call for public debt to be less than 50% in the present value terms and tax to GDP ratio to be at least 25%. We are not meeting those targets yet. Only a few of the partner states have attained the debt to GDP target of less than 50%. Other partner states are still trying to move forward. All partner states are yet to attain the tax to GDP ratio of 25%. But again, if private sector momentum is not as high, taxes are not collected as much, we don't have new approaches, to attain these ratios is going to be quite difficult, and yet we have a target that we have set for ourselves. But despite the largely positive outlook, again, I cannot overemphasize some of the challenges that the region is faced with. The adverse climate conditions, inequality, and we did hear about inequality and the need to include all stakeholders, and I'll speak to that a little later. So with the above in mind, and I just painted a very, very brief picture of the macroeconomic situation because I know that there's a panel coming up where we'll discuss this in a bit more detail. Let me now refer to how all of this relates to the potential of the AfCFTA. We've all heard about the opportunity the AfCFTA has to offer to the region. We've talked about the numbers, how it's going to support intra-Africa trade, the billions of people, the combined GDP, $3.4 trillion. All of this is important and will define the region's economic fortunes. However, concerted effort is needed to turn this aspiration into a reality. A larger part of our population does not know about the AfCFTA. Here in this room, we have all the information, we have access either through information online, in discussions such as this, but we are leaving out a vast majority of the population. And I really hope that the policy dialogue series going forward will extend to the regions, to the people that are actually involved in small-scale business, the women, MSMEs. We need to bring them to this discussion if the AfCFTA is going to turn into a reality. We cannot be seen to be supporting big business. We need to be inclusive. We need to understand what kind of information is needed by these participants that are not engaged now so that we can include them. I hope that at the end of these discussions, we will have some outcomes around targeting these groups of stakeholders. Barriers to trade in all regions in Africa are numerous. They range from complex matters such as hard and soft infrastructure, the lack of this, poor transport connectivity, logistics, insufficient energy, poor border infrastructure, networks, to language barriers, lack of internet connectivity. I mean, there's so many issues that are impeding access to the various opportunities that the AfCFTA has to offer. However, all of these will take time to be resolved. And I think a prioritization approach and defining quick wins, taking into account some of these challenges, medium-term and longer-term solutions. All of these issues require financing. And the financing gap is huge on infrastructure, on energy. We cannot wait for all these issues to be addressed to start to benefit, to utilize the opportunity. So how do we prioritize? What can we do immediately? We have development partners that are willing to support and ready to provide technical expertise, financial resources to address these challenges. But we, as a region, cannot take a whole basket of issues and ask for all these issues to be addressed. Let's prioritize as countries and as regions and come up with plans that are achievable, realistic, smart, that are also targeted to what we want to obtain. I've read about the benefits from the AfCFTA, but I haven't yet come across a document that shows me the targets for particular periods, that between 2023 and 2025, we would like to have at least 18 companies connected and benefiting from the AfCFTA. By 2028, we should have 300 companies. Of those 18 in the first priority list, 10 should be MSMEs, 5, and that should be a regional plan that cascades down to RECs, cascades down to nationals and countries. I think that will help us monitor this opportunity from the AfCFTA and will also help us to learn what is working and what is not working. If we don't develop a clear monitoring and evaluation mechanism, again, we will continue talking about this opportunity, but to be able to evaluate whether it's working without data will be very, very difficult. I also want to touch a bit on industrialization. Limited industrialization is a major factor in why intra-Africa trade is still very low. And we all know this, I think, in this room. Studies have established that we will need to have a unique approach to industrialization. We need our own print, our own blueprint to industrialization. We must take into account the developments happening that are very, very dynamic. Artificial intelligence, it's here, it's with us. How are we embedding this into our industrialization policies? Technology, very dynamic. Every single day there's something new that can be incorporated into different production processes. How are we catching up with that pace? And that's the reason why we need to have a unique approach that is Africa developed and will be implemented in a way that takes into account our own circumstances. Yes, it's good to replicate what has worked well in other regions, and we know what has worked well in Asia, in India. Let's take all of that and develop our own unique approach. I always take into account how cultural influences impact on the way we do our business, the way we produce. For instance, in an industry, sometimes the women have to leave earlier because they have to go home and look after their families or prepare. However, those are some issues that are very African, very regional. We need to think, as you said, not in the box. What did you say, Antoine? Remove the box. We need to think and develop policies that take into account our own unique situations. And these will need to take into account the rise of digitalization, changes in organizational models of production, geographic distribution. We must also think about greening industries, greening and taking into account climate-related issues. We must take into account geopolitical divides, the reemergence of concerns around supply security, disintegration of constraints to adventurous policy-making space. All of these are very important. So let's reimagine our industries. Let's reimagine our industrial policy development processes. And so with the above, I will probably put forward some perspectives for our reflection during these discussions this morning. And first, the development of regional value chains. The commitment to development of regional value chains remains very high. There's political will. There are discussions, conversations that have taken place over years. Regional economic communities, including us at the EAC, have defined roadmaps for specific regional value chains, including apparel and textiles, pharmaceuticals, automotives. Some of these link into value chains that have been developed at AfCFTA level. And some of these have also helped to identify, these have been developed based on the basis of a comparative advantage. But to accelerate the growth of these value chains, the role of the private sector in mobilization of resources cannot be underestimated. I also believe that we have enough plans. I think we have enough plans. We are not short of plans. We are short on implementation. We are short on implementation. If we all spent a second to just Google regional value chains, tell me how many you will find from different regions, countries. We are short on implementation. We are not short on technical expertise. We are short on bringing this expertise together to reflect and brainstorm together. We are short on forging partnerships that work. Let's reflect on these issues. Let's not go away and come up with another plan. Let's go away and bring all the plans that have been developed. Let's dust them. Let's evaluate what has worked. Let's discard what we are not going to use because it's not relevant anymore. And let's restart. Let's co-create. I think that is going to be very, very important. If we don't do that, it's going to be a vicious cycle. I'll be back here and I'll give the same address and I'll speak about this. I want us to come back and say, you know, we zeroed down on these 3 value chains. We developed an implementation roadmap that takes into account the contribution of each stakeholder. The private sector, this is what we expect. Government, this is what we expect. Academia, please do this research and give it to us. Secretariat at the EAC, please go away and engage with the political leaders or with the policy makers, technocrats, and do these things for us. And then we can all come back together and check the progress that we have made. We are not short of plans. I will emphasize that. And secondly, I did mention already the issue of inclusivity and leaving no one behind. To tackle inequalities and to ensure that the AfCFTA leaves no one behind, I did mention already the role of the micro, small, and medium enterprises, youth, women, small-scale cross-border traders. At the EAC, part of the strategies that have been taken is to simplify. A number of documents from the EAC have been translated into local languages so that they can be understood by the groups of people that perhaps will have difficulty understanding complex technical documents that are also in a language that they find difficult to express themselves in. Let's look at simplicity. It will be very, very important. A lot has been developed under the AfCFTA, different policies. I've seen a protocol on women, but it's all very high level, and we need to bring it down, as I said earlier, through simplification, through forums that allow everybody to be engaged, where challenges can be expressed, through helping to provide market linkage and connectivity opportunities. All of these are very, very important, and it's part of our role here in this room to contribute to that process of inclusivity and leaving no one behind. On services, services remains a leading contributor to GDP. In the ESC, service exports have grown by 46.6% since 2010, and especially when the common market came into force. Important advances have been made in various services sectors to boost regional cross-border investments. Again, this is a sector that involves very, very many stakeholders. The value chain for services is very, very broad. Let's start to think about services as a special sector within the AfCFTA and to see how best we can also harness that opportunity. A lot of engagement on the AfCFTA is in the area of goods, manufacturing. All of these, of course, have linkages to services, but if we can be deliberate about some service sectors, I think that will also help us harness the opportunity from the AfCFTA. And I, of course, recognize the potential of a dynamic and functional digital economy in contributing to socio-economic growth. And in this, the digital economy, this is also an area where we have the opportunity to bring on board our youth. We all understand majority of our populations are youth-based. If we can bring on board through the digital economy our youth to get engaged, to get involved, it takes years to build business. So if they start young, as part of this process, we will see opportunities trickle down to these young people who will potentially grow and create more businesses. So let's see how we can use the digital economy. Let's see how this can help us tap into regional opportunities targeted at the AfCFTA. The role of REX in all of this process. At the ESC, we have been very, very heavily involved in supporting AfCFTA developments, right from the discussions and negotiations. You will know that the ESC presented its common external tariff offer based on what had already been agreed at the ESC. And I think that's where regional economic blocks also provide a foundation. Not much work needed to be done engaging with each country to be able to develop CET offers. Already an offer was in place. We've also been very much involved in the sensitization and bringing on board stakeholders, partners, businesses to be able to understand the opportunity that the AfCFTA offers. In terms of helping and supporting the implementation, we are also engaging very collaboratively with the Secretariat and looking for avenues and opportunities for collaboration. And indeed, this is also an issue that we have been challenged to take forward by the leaders, political leaders in the region. So hopefully, going forward, the ESC can provide that platform for the countries that are member of the ESC to avoid patchy sort of areas of work that are not coming together. As I conclude, allow me to highlight part of the contribution that the ESC has progressively worked towards achieving the targets of increasing manufacturing through exports. We've developed policies on industrial development in strategic sectors. All these policies are available. Promoting regional value chains, I did mention some of the value chains that the ESC is working to develop. Investment policy that promotes the community as a common investment area, and with Rwanda being a part of the ESC, I think this is really important. Promoting the strategic use of public procurement to stimulate demand and expand the local market. for different sectors, local content requirements, promoting MSMEs, implementing the common external tariff regime, which I mentioned already, enhancing public-private sector dialogue, and strengthening capacity of industries. So it's my sincere hope that at the end of the series today, the panels that are coming up, we will have clear outcomes on how Rwanda and the EAC will contribute to ensuring that benefits from the AfCFTA can flow to citizens, to participants in the economy. In the end, we are here because we want each and every citizen to benefit from these opportunities. If this benefits trickles down, this is what adds up to contribute to economic development. If we have many more economic participants, this is where tax revenues will increase. This is how they will increase. So I hope that at the end, and we stand committed to remain available, supportive, and to provide all the resources that are needed, technical and partnerships, to be able to support Rwanda as a country, but also the EAC region and the continent at large to be able to achieve these important development benchmarks. So with those few words, I wish you very fruitful deliberations. We will be around to listen, to engage, and to participate. And we hope that we will hear from you all. I'm available to have a few discussions on any particular issues that you'd like that are EAC related. And I have a colleague, Flavia, as well. Flavia, if you could wave. She's also here and will be also in position to address any comments or questions that you might have. Thank you very much and wish you a good morning today.